Hi, all. Gary here with a little bit of a different video. Wanted to share my thoughts on a question that seems to be popping up more and more for MBA applicants, and that is, do I take the GMAT or the GRE? And it's a pretty relevant question now that most major schools are accepting both. And they're very different tests, so you really got to think about what's going to highlight your strengths the best, right? And for me, it really comes down to three things. How many times can you take the test before your deadline? Two, where are you either above or below the average scores for your relevant schools? And three, do you prefer vocab or grammar and logic based questions? So let me break those down. The first one, how many times can you take the test? The reason I bring that up is, a lot of people say, hey, GMAT has harder math, the GRE has harder verbal, use that as your guide. I don't think it's that simple. When looking at the math, it may feel like the GMAT has harder math, but remember, it's question adaptive, which means every time you get a good question or you get a question right, it's going to throw you some harder questions. You get it wrong, it's going to take you back. So it is by definition always trying to push your limits. And as you do better and better, it will continue to push you out of your comfort zone to the point where it's designed to find where you get half wrong and half right? It's going to continue to elevate the difficulty of the questions, whereas with the GRE, it's just not that efficient of a tool, being section adaptive. So naturally, if you're doing well on the math questions, it's going to feel difficult as you go further along. And even if you're not, it's just going to continue to feel hard. But I think it's okay, right? I mean, it does that because it really wants to be efficient at figuring out where you are. And it is. I will say I took the GMAT, maybe a few, 4 or 5 practice tests. I got the same quant score every time. There is like no variability on, it's just remarkably consistent. Whereas with the GRE, the standard deviation is really wide. You get a 163 one time and a 153 the next time. And it's just luck of the draw on some of those questions. But what I really struggle with is, with the GRE, if you want a really high score, you almost got to be perfect, or close to perfect on this thing. And that's a lot of pressure. I mean, to be fair with the GMAT, you really have to be near perfect in the beginning of the test to get you to those hard questions. But once you're there, the pressure's off a little bit because you aren't going to be perfect. You're going to get some wrong and some right. That's how it's designed. So for me, I like that a little bit better. But what I can say is that because of that consistency of scoring and that efficiency that the GMAT has, if you have one shot to get this thing right, to do this test before your application deadline, I would rather take comfort in knowing that I'm going to get a representative score far more often with the GMAT. So I would lean in that direction. The reverse of that being, if you can take multiple shots on goal, if you can take this test a few times, 3, 4 times, you got some flexibility, round 1, round 2, whatever it happens to be, then you might want to consider the GRE, because remember, with their select a score, you can send the test that is the best for you, right? You got to send a full test. You can't pick, quant on one, verbal on the other, but you can send your best test. And so, if you got natural variability in there, sometimes you're going to get better than your average and sometimes you're going to get worse, but you only have to send the one you like. So if you have multiple shots on goal, consider the GRE because it's naturally highly variable. So that's point number 1. Point number 2 is around whether or not you're above or below their average, right? Remember, business schools, hey, it's a business. It's based on rankings. Rankings are partially based on selectivity. So, and the GMAT is a big component of that. They have to supply their GMAT scores to the ranking agencies. So if you are above their average, GMAT's a good thing because they get credit for it. Great, we'll accept this person, they'll drag our average up. If you're below the average, why give them a reason to feel bad about that? Just, instead do the GRE and they can say, all right, well, this isn't counting against our rankings. We'll look at it, but it isn't as much of a need for them to look at it in that way. So that's an important consideration and could be enough in and of itself, right? Because they're going to look at the application holistically, but they do have to keep that in mind from the GMAT standpoint, what it does to their selectivity rankings. And then finally, on the third point, specifically the verbals are different. They are different tests in terms of the content that they look at. The GRE has that big text completion and sentence equivalence set of questions. And those are largely vocab based, right? And so if you're a native English speaker and avid reader, you're probably feeling pretty good about your vocab, and that may be the direction, that would give you, a better verbal score, percentile based. Similarly or differently, on the GMAT, they take those sections and they swap them in for sentence correction, which is grammar, meaning, idioms, that sort of stuff, and critical reasoning, which is logic-based, almost LSAT types of questions. What is this passage saying, etc. So, if that's more your bag, that's great. That might, push you towards the GMAT. If, again, you're feeling good about your vocab, you might go the other direction, the GRE. So those are the three kind of things that I tend to think about. But love to hear your thoughts. I mean, is that consistent with how you're thinking about it? You guys thinking about something else? Let me know in the comments. But best of luck, everyone. I hope it all goes well, and stay tuned for some more thoughts. Thanks all. Bye.